For today's test, we picked 4 displays: Hisense U78Q Pro, TCL C7K, Philips MLED920, and Samsung QN85F. The order in which I have listed them is completely random because it will be a blind test. For most of it, you won't know which image comes from which TV, so that it doesn't affect your judgment. Only once we've finished the visual tests will I reveal the order. Sounds interesting? So let's go with the comparison of black and contrast. This is undoubtedly one of the most important things in a TV. It decides whether the image will delight with depth and plasticity, or on the contrary, disappoint with faded grayish blacks. How can we evaluate this aspect? It's very simple. In the middle of the frame is the Sony HX3110 studio monitor worth $35,000. It presents the perfect image created by the film crew, and it is the point of reference. It is worth paying attention to whether the images from the TV are not excessively brightened or darkened, or whether they do not have luminous glows called the halo effect, or brightness jumps. I will also add that all TVs were calibrated before the test and their images were recorded with a professional camera and processed in exactly the same way. You can learn more about this test method in the link that you now see in the upper corner of the screen. We now move on to the test of HDR movies mastered to 4000 nits. These are selected moments of recordings with the best effects that we found. In this part of the comparison, we focus on which TV shows the highest brightness. Other subjective impressions are less important here, for example colors. They may be slightly distorted by the camera. The screen presenting the highest brightness levels will also look the best live, unless of course it is artificially brightened in relation to the director's monitor. We now move on to the category in which we continue to test brightness in HDR, but these movies have been mastered in a slightly lower brightness range. Their maximum effects oscillate around 1000 nits. This is how the vast majority of films and series on streaming platforms are created in 2025. In this category, special attention should be paid to whether the image is bright, but not brighter than the studio screen. In such a case, it may look better on a recording, but it will be unpleasant to watch live, artificially brightened, and tiring for the eyes. In other words, we focus on the similarity of brightness to the Sony monitor, not only in the brightest lights, but also in medium and dark tones. The opposite situation is also possible: excessive darkening of the image, especially in night scenes at the end of the sequence. The next category is the smoothness of tonal transitions. Even an inexperienced viewer will notice problems in this matter. The challenge for the TVs here is to display smooth tonal transitions without clear cutoffs called posterization or banding. Unfortunately, due to YouTube's compression, this problem will probably be visible on every screen. The goal is to have no more posterization than on the reference studio screen, because when viewing the studio screen in person, such an effect is not visible at all. This category will be quite long because we will first look for problems in dark blacks and then in highlights. Upscaling is important when the content being watched has a lower resolution than 4K. Now we are testing the most difficult case, old content with SD resolution. Its appearance is always a compromise between artificial sharpening, which will cause additional contours, and excessive softening and blurring of the image.
Now we'll test something seemingly similar to gradation. This time, however, we are testing the TV's ability to fix such problems on low-quality content.
Motion reproduction is an important category for gamers and sports enthusiasts. The basic test is to capture a photo of a moving object that flies across the screen in just 2 seconds. This is how it looks on each of the TVs. In an ideal case, the image should be perfectly clear and leave no streaks behind. OLED and QD-OLED screens have a big advantage here, as they have a very short pixel response time. The next part of the test will concern the number of artifacts generated by the motion-compensated frame interpolation system. This is very important in the case of TVs with a 120 Hz or better matrix. If we want to use image frame interpolation to achieve better fluidity and image sharpness, it would be good if there were as few artifacts as possible in the form of cutouts or other imperfections. The light resistance of the matrix results from several factors. Firstly, the maximum brightness of the matrix, which you will see later in the graph, and secondly, the ability to absorb and disperse ambient light. The photos speak for themselves here. The viewing angles do not require much commentary. I will only add that in the case of large screen, this parameter is important even when we sit straight ahead, because our eyes catch the angle with the edges of the screen. Okay, time to get started. The first TV was the TCL C7K, the second the Philips MLED920, the third the Hisense U78Q Pro, and the fourth the Samsung QN85F. You may be wondering why it is specific for models. Even though they are positioned differently in the manufacturer's lineups, their market prices are currently very similar. That makes them direct competitors. Did you manage to recognize the order of the TVs by their image? Which one did the best in this blind test in your opinion? Be sure to let us know in the comments and leave a sub so we don't miss the next episodes. And we will move on. It's time to assess the usability functions, gaming comfort, and present their performance measurements. Now we move on to the functionality tests, starting with the console compatibility. The most important thing here is support for 4K signal at 120 Hz, then VRR, and correct implementation of AGAG. However, even more important is input lag, in other words, signal delay. A good result is less than 20 milliseconds. This delay value should not be felt even by professional players. At value above 40 milliseconds, the comfort of the game decreases. Using a TV as a computer monitor is not very common, but if someone wanted to, the legibility of fonts, input lag, and support for G-Sync are very important. And now, we see what small text looks like on each of the TVs. At the very end of this episode, there is something for hardcore enthusiasts who really like to analyze screens. Measurements are of course taken with top-class equipment. If you have reached this part, it means that you are a big enthusiast of the subject, and I hope that you have already subscribed to our channel and regularly visit our website www.choose.tv. There, in the TV tests, you will find even more information. For example, the availability of apps, which we decided not to include in this episode because the situation changes dynamically and we update the page regularly. I invite you to the last segment. The measurements should match the impressions that the TV images made on you. If everything matches, it means that we have designed our test procedures well. See you at the next episode.